This is the Secret Life of Mold podcast. Host Craig Cooper. Today is the last episode of our 4-part series on why mold sampling is an important part of a mold inspection. Last week, we had a really cool episode on the specifics of qPCR sampling. And, we really learned a lot and shared a lot of great information. And we're hoping to do the same today. We're going to dive into some specifics of some of the different types of samples that we offer. And I am joined again today by my colleagues, Brandon Apple, COO of Mold Inspection Sciences.
Thank you, Craig.
And Mr. Mike Marshall. What's going on there, Mike, with your
You almost said mustache. Mike Mustache.
Mike Mustache Marshall.
I
was going to say Mario Marshall.
Mario.
You think that's what it is? I just gotta be honest with you guys. Like, I don't know how you do it, Brandon. Like, even these fake beards and fake mustaches are just, I just can't do it.
It takes practice,
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
You got to put some effort in.
Well,
lots of grooming.
I just did it for like the intro, like a little comic relief, but I just can't do it, man.
Yeah.
I just can't do it. I gotta be me.
Yeah.
You look good as you.
Well, there we go. Good-ish, right? Good-ish.
Yep, goodish.
Goodish. I like
Not
that.
quite beardish, but goodish.
Well, super excited to be here again. Just love doing these with you guys. Super informative. We got a lot of good content today. I'm super, excited about this one specifically because, as you guys know, we sometimes get kind of pigeonholed into, you guys just do mold, but we don't. We're so much more dynamic than that. We have, so many more environmental inspections that we can do and testing that we do offer. That's why I think, this series was just so important, just to kind of let everybody know that, we do all of these different types of samplings. And this one, not that it's any more important than the other, but this one will really accentuate that. So super excited about this episode for that reason. So thanks for having me on.
Definitely. For sure. And I like a good story because it kind of reminds me of one.
Do.
Yes, you do.
If you don't mind.
You're a good
May I tell a story?
Yes.
So talking about other types of samples, like you said, we do kind of, molds in the name of the company. So we could very easily get pigeonholed into that, but definitely do some other stuff. Going back over the last couple of years, one really popped out in my head for sure. It was a local person here to me in Colorado, specifically in Boulder. They contacted us. They were, as a lot of our clients are, they're having some health issues. They're trying to find out what might be going on. So brought us out for initially a mold investigation. Through the course of that, though, they also mentioned that their doctor had identified some other issues going on with them. Specifically, they had tested high for arsenic. So we don't hear that one very often. So that one, that kind of sunk into my brain. But through the course of the initial investigation, we found some issues going on, nothing too crazy in regards to mold or moisture, anything like that. But we started, really digging in deeper with them. And going back to the arsenic, it was suggested, hey, what if we test the water for that? So that was step one, which we did, pulled some water samples, which, we'll go into a little more detail on water samples in a bit, but these were very specific to arsenic. And honestly, didn't find anything there. Just kind of continuing the discussion and digging deeper, peeling the layers back. One of the next most common, places you'll find arsenic, believe it or not, is in soil. So we started looking at soil and actually did some soil samples on their property and discovered levels of arsenic, but believe it or not, they were actually below the EPA's permissible exposure level. But again, looking at the situation for what it was, let's start looking at where we tested it. Believe it or not, these individuals had a horse arena on their property. And if you've ever been in a horse arena, it's this really nice plush dirt that the horses trot through, and they send up little plumes of dust here and there.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can imagine, even though it was low, or let's say, lower than the permissible exposure level in that soil, these people were exposed to probably more than, hey, it's just the natural soil out buried underneath the grass and things like that. So that ended up being what we were able to associate their health conditions with. I should say their doctor associated, because again, we're not doctors,
right?
But it was helping everybody connect the dots and find out what was really going on. So that one was a really cool scenario for us, for sure.
Interesting. Arsenic in the soil.
Yeah,
it's a good story.
And it kind of just accentuates kind of what we've been saying in these past 3 episodes of, we're there to uncover the root cause of whatever's happening with you. Now, if we walk in and you already know that you have a mold issue, or you see mold or something like that, then we can kind of start there. But like I said in the mold issue, if we don't, you're having some kind of health issues, that's not where we're going to stop. We're not going to stop just because we didn't find something. That is going to give us some answers. It's going to tell us that that's not the cause. But we're going to continue down the path. We're going to get you to that solution. We're going to figure out what that is. And there's so many other ways to get there. But that's a perfect example.
Yeah,
definitely. Absolutely. Well, we're talking about water samples, and let's talk a little bit more, Brandon, about kind of where when is it common for us to collect those samples? When are they requested? Kind of talk to us a little bit about when we normally do that testing.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, in this past scenario, we were being very specific to the arsenic, but we offer a much wider panel. And when is it probably most common would be in real estate transactions. You're purchasing a house, you want to know the condition of everything, including the water. When would I say it's most important is definitely if somebody's on well water, as opposed to city water, but we'll jump into that a little bit too. You can have a problem in either environment, but when you're dealing with well water, aside from, the pipes and the plumbing systems, you're also subject to what might be soaking into those soils and things like that. So really important in well water. And correct me if I'm wrong, Craig, but out in Portland where you're at, it's a requirement if you're on well water to have it tested during a transaction. Is that correct?
It is. It's certainly for like FHA loans. They do require it. I think a lot of lenders are requiring it now. It's definitely commonplace, within the real estate industry to have that done. What I find oftentimes, which is kind of interesting, is usually the seller provides that, and
interesting.
The seller collects the samples and has it analyzed, and so there's we always are real big on chain of custody and making sure that the samples are collected by an independent third party. It's not the case in the well water testing, at least here in Oregon. Unless that's changed, and I could be wrong. It's been a while since I've been involved in that, but that's the way it used to be. But
no doubt.
It's just, I guess, the honor system. But I think if it were me, if I were buying a home, I wouldn't rely on the seller's test. I'd certainly, it'd be great to have it as a second set of data to look at, but I would definitely have my own sample collected by a company, third-party company like Mold Inspection Sciences.
And
have it analyzed by a reputable laboratory that I'm in control of. So
there you go, for sure. Cool. Yeah, like I said, that's a super common scenario, but also just aside from well water, even if you're on city water, there's a lot that can happen in those scenarios as well. Some of the things it tests for when we do the standard sample is heavy metals, things like lead. We all know lead's super important. That can lead to, especially in children, some really detrimental health effects. And believe it or not, plumbing systems used to be, in essence, soldered. I know that's not the correct term, but they used to be forged together with forms of metal, forms of lead. So that's a common place to find it in older homes. Also test for iron and manganese. So those are really important things. Also starts to look at water quality issues, things like the pH in the water, the alkalinity, turbidity is another big one as well. That's like the clarity of the water. And then also start to look at bacteria, type issues that might be impacting water. Some of the more common, human related ones are the scary terms, E. coli and total coliforms. Those are related to, sewage related items that can potentially contaminate freshwater systems. Also, looking more at kind of general agriculture type situations. Again, maybe that well water situation is that we test for nitrates and nitrites, which come from potentially fertilizers, where do those track back to is animal waste in a lot of cases. So when we talk about things we don't want in our water, what's probably number one is going to be human or animal waste. So really good things to keep in mind when it comes to, testing your water systems. So that's a really common one that we like to offer.
actually worked with a client the other day who mentioned, and it was a rural property, definitely farmland all around. And one of the things we were doing a mold assessment, but she did mention that she had some issues with her well. This was a rental house, and they were sick, and they had some stomach issues too. And come to find out, they did some testing on the well, and it was a shared well. And there was an area just above on the property, just above the well, a little ways away, but pretty close, that they would accumulate all the byproducts of the animals.
Yeah.
And it soaked into the ground and into the aquifer and into the water system. And they were being, they had some coliform, definitely some bacteria going on. And that, they had no idea. They didn't even know that was even possible. But by doing the water test, they figured that out and then, cleaned and treated the well. I think they had to do some other things too, but
no doubt.
But just a good example of how we never know what's in our water. Yeah. And, even more reason to do.
And one of the bigger things about the bacteria testing also is that normally that's more of an immediate response, from if someone's getting sick or not feeling right. But the scarier one is really, the heavy metals in the water, because those are the silent killers, right? Those are the ones that are depositing, small amounts of those minerals and ions into your bloodstream, which lead. A lot of people don't know it can trick the body into thinking that it's actually healthy calcium, and the body deposits it into bone material. And so you don't know about that until years and years and years later. So, it's not just about, getting your water tested if somebody's getting sick. It's, you move into a new house, you have a scenario, you should, put some sort of a safe water plan in place, even for your home. And we'll touch on this a little bit later too, but thought it was a good spot to just kind of talk about that a little.
No doubt.
And back to the pipes we were talking about. A lot of people think of lead with lead pipes as like main service lines, from municipalities or going into an older home. That was the most common thing. But and then a lot of those have been replaced over the years. But there's still the concern of copper pipes. Brandon, you mentioned, and you kind of touched on the solder. It was in that material they use to combine those pipes, which is the solder material, where there could be lead leaching into the water. And so a lot of people think they have a newer home with copper pipes, you're good, there's no lead. Well, the older copper pipes, may have had some issues with that, and that's where that testing is important.
Good point.
Anything else about the water testing, Brandon?
No, I think. Well, we could go on for days. I mean, how deep do you want to go? Do we have a time limit?
Tomorrow I do have plans. So
for sure. Okay. Now that water again, it's one of the pillars of life. There's not life without water, so might want to make sure that's looking good. So I'll end on that.
Absolutely.
And not even in a real estate transaction. If for someone who's been in a home and they just maybe have never had their water tested, give us a call and have us come out and do a water screen and just just for peace of mind, if nothing else. So definitely a good idea. Let's talk about another type of testing we provide, or sampling, allergen sampling. Brandon, take it away.
Yeah, for sure. Allergy testing, that one, really common. A lot of the symptoms people call us for related to mold. Mold in and of itself is an allergen. So a lot of those symptoms can show themselves as an allergy, but obviously there's lots of other allergens that are potentially in our home. I guess I'm going to, can I quiz you two real quick and throw one out there? What do you think is the most common allergy and asthma trigger within homes in the United States? Any idea on that one?
Yep, I do.
I would say, well, I'll just play devil's advocate and say, the one you hear about the most on the news is like, the pollen counts are high today, so maybe I'll say pollen.
Yeah, you hear that one a lot.
Good guess.
Yeah.
I a lot of people think dander, pet animal dander.
That's a common one.
It's a real common one. I know it's not number one, but that's one that we see a lot. I'm having a hard time.
I wouldn't have asked if I didn't know you guys would get it wrong. So, but believe it or not, and this is, I'm going to quote this, according to the American Academy of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology, it is a microscopic insect commonly referred to as a dust mite. And believe it or not, there is a lot of dust mites. Number one, for sure. And a lot of people, they hear dust mite and what's their no, I keep a clean home. Like there's no dust mites in my house.
Right.
Well, you know, being in this industry, we learned that on a microscopic level, no home is truly clean, is it?
Right.
So every home has some degree of dust mites. They have a very natural order in the grand scheme of, you know, nature, and they, you know, dispose of microscopic things. Most common is the stuff that we're shedding on a regular basis is skin cells. So those dust mites are eating our skin cells, believe it or not. So going back to allergy testing, what we most commonly offer, it's the multiplex array for indoor allergens, commonly referred to as the Maria. And what's it going to test for? We already got dust mites as a big priority, so we're going to throw that one in there. It also tests for, Craig, you had mentioned the dander and things like that. That's going to be the cat allergens and dog allergens. Those are pretty common, obviously, if you have animals. And then also cockroaches. That's another one of those higher, you know, priority ones. And again, a lot of people, you know, keep a clean house or apartment or this, that. I would refer those multi-unit facilities with mini apartments. You could have a spotless apartment, but who knows what your neighbor's doing next door. Believe it or not, you could have some allergens related to that. So, you know, the ability to test for allergens can really answer some questions as well. So another, you know, one of those tools in our tool bag to help us determine if there's a problem or not.
Yeah. I had another interesting conversation with a client, and we were talking about allergen testing or allergy testing. She decided not to do that because a real common thing we hear is, well, I know I've got a cat. I know I have high dander levels. Well, yeah, you probably do if you have a cat, but you might also have something else. Yeah. But I was talking to her. I'm like, well, you know, at least maybe do a few things just to try to rule out some allergens as being a cause of your symptoms. I'm like, you know, a good thing to do would be to put a dust mite cover on your mattress. And I asked her, I'm like, how old are your pillows? And she looked at her boyfriend who was sitting right next to her, and they both smiled. And I'm like, well, what am I missing here? And he goes, her pillow is like from when she was like 6 years old. It's like 28 years old. You know? And I'm like, oh, wow, how heavy is it? Because, you know, you hear that really old pillows can be really heavy. Well, a lot of that's, believe it or not, dust mites. Anyway, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to, obviously you have an attachment to that pillow, so I'm not going to convince you to get rid of your pillow, but how about if we put that in a dust mite cover, you know?
Yeah, there you go.
It's one of those things that, you know, maybe it was part of it, maybe not, but I kind of suspect, because we know that dust mites are one of the number one leading causes of allergens. I think that gal, you know, it'd be interesting to follow up with her and see if how she feels after she's not.
That's one of those where you say, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just telling you what I would do.
Right. Exactly. If I were you,
I'd get rid of the pillow.
Well, I learn something new every day. So I just wrote a note that I'm going to replace all my pillows here shortly.
Yeah. I heard that a long time ago, and it was like 25% of the weight of the pillow is for older pillows is dust mites. I have no idea if that's accurate, but it sounds like a scary number to me. So I always throw that out there. Yeah. But if your pillow is more than and honestly, my pillow is probably like 4 years old, so I shouldn't be preaching.
We're probably all going to go replace our pillows now.
Yeah.
I think 25% of the weight of my wife's pillow is lavender. Sprays on there
really?
They're out.
That kills dust mites.
Essential oils. That's why they call them essential, right?
They are
essential. That's funny.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to the next one. Bacteria sampling.
Yeah.
Bacteria. Fun, exciting topic.
Yeah, we get into all the fun stuff here, don't we?
Oh, we do.
You know, it's funny when we get a new employee in and they start to realize half the stuff we talk about and do, and it's like, yeah, you're going to learn a lot of gross stuff as we go along. So bacteria, it's another one of those things. We're exposed to it every day. We'll never get away from it, but we want to know, is it the bad stuff, the good stuff, and or is it a bad situation? So definitely really common, form of testing is bacteria sampling. Where is it most common? It's definitely related to sewage losses. The reality of it is we all have sewage pipes running through our houses. You know, they're connected to our toilets, to our tubs, to the bottoms of our sinks, things like that. And it's not uncommon for some of them to break at a certain time. So if plumbing was done incorrectly, some, altering event happened and there's some sort of a loss related to that, it can start to become a concern. Hey, do we not only have a water issue here and or a mold issue, do we also have a bacterial issue?
Right.
So those are really helpful to identify. Do we have bacteria? If so, potentially what types? Also really common in a clearance scenario. So, hey, we know we had a sewage loss, also referred to as a black water loss, which makes sense if you think about it. But, really common to have a remediation contractor come in and clean and sanitize that area. And we want to be able to verify, was that done properly? In those scenarios, often we'll do kind of the simpler version of the test. And what that's doing is just testing for the presence or absence of the two most common bacteria related to sewage, which is E. coli and total coliforms. But that can be expanded upon, though, and we do what's called a quantitray sewage screen, which tests for additional bacteria. It does test for the E. coli as well as the total coliforms. Starts to give concentrations of those. Also tests for enterococcus. That consists of over 18 different species of bacteria related to the intestines and things like that. So we can definitely do a broader scan of that if the situation warrants it. So again, one of those another sample that really helps us, depending on the situation, determine the extent of things, and or again, going back to that clearance, hey, we had a problem and we're all good to go, everything's clean, let's put this area back together and get these people back on, with their lives. So really helpful.
Yeah, that's great. So Mike, you guys, we touched on lead, and I'd like you to kind of go a little deeper in on that, talk about that a little bit more. But asbestos, you guys do some asbestos testing in Texas, where some other markets do not.
Actually, we do quite a bit of asbestos testing down here. And, I'm sure that our listeners, everybody has kind of heard of asbestos and some of the dangers. If you've ever been up at 2:00 in the morning, there's always some attorney asking you if you might have been exposed to it. And you could be have mesothelioma is, one of the dangers. But, a lot of people don't know what it is. They just hear this word asbestos and they're just like, oh, it's bad, but they don't really know what it is. And people will probably be surprised to hear that asbestos itself is actually a naturally occurring mineral in the earth. And, probably a long time ago, someone found out by happenstance that the fibrous materials that asbestos is made up of is heat resistant. So, the wheels start spinning and you're like, oh, wow, this is heat resistant. We can make some products that can do insulation or different things. And that's really what we did. And in the beginning, when we first, discovered it, that's what they were doing. It was used in, thousands of, consumer products for many, many years. And then people started getting sick and mesothelioma and some different kinds of cancers. Because what happens is, when that gets disturbed, that dust, there's friable and non-friable. Friable is, when it's in almost like it's raw form, where you can kind of you can push it between your fingers like this and it'll kind of just turn into dust, right? And so that is literally the most dangerous one, because when you inhale that the particles are so small, it can get down to, PM 2.5 or smaller. And when you inhale those, they go so deep into the lungs that your lungs, your nasal cavities and things can't filter that out. So it gets deep into the lungs and it just stays there. And that's what causes those things. And, some of the things that they used to put these in, still used in some of them, but in a different way. But they use it a lot in shingles or insulation materials. I don't know if you guys heard about when the World Trade Center buildings went down. They were in the middle of removing all the asbestos in those buildings, and that was a lot of what was floating around down there after they collapsed was asbestos containing dust. And why many of those first responders and people that were on site were having major health issues later on because they were just down there breathing all that in. A lot of it was asbestos. So it is still used in products today, like brake pads and different things, because it is heat resistant. It keeps those things cool. So it's not a bad product. It's just bad to inhale. You don't want to get that, inside of you. And that's really when the danger is. If you had, asbestos, and I've had this conversation with some clients, they have a popcorn ceiling in their garage, which I don't know who thought of that, but it just wouldn't be me. But they're, he's like, oh, I bought this house and there's a popcorn ceiling in there, and I heard that they could be, it could contain asbestos. And my next question with them, as it always is in all of these projects that we have, is what are you trying to find out? What are you doing with this area? Like, what's the goal? And he's like, well, I just want to know that it's safe. And I said, well, what are you going to do with that area? Are you rebuilding? Are you removing material? Is it just going to stay there? Well, no, we're not doing anything. It's just going to be here. Not every time is it right to just start disturbing and removing materials. If you're going to be building something and be cutting some things out, you definitely want to know if that's going to be containing anything that's dangerous for you to inhale. But if it's just going to be there, we can tell you that. And we can also test it for you, just so you know that if you go to cut a hole in it and you want to put a light in or something like that, at least you'll know. You have that peace of mind. But we don't always recommend that you just start removing things. There's different ways to come in and test for it that's non-destructive or minimally destructive. We can cut little pieces of it out, 1 by 1 little square inch in the back corner somewhere where it's not really noticeable. But again, it's not extremely dangerous unless it's disturbed and then ingested or inhaled. I mean, that's the real dangerous point for asbestos is when those types of things happen. And we learned that many years ago in 1989 is when we finally started banning a lot of asbestos containing products. And although it's not banned in the U.S., it's highly regulated across the United States. It's a federal thing. And anytime you're doing any type of demolition, construction, anything like that where you're removing materials, especially in older buildings, you're going to want to make sure that you have an asbestos survey and at least somebody on site who's going to, if not test for those, give you that survey to let you know if there's any asbestos containing materials or things that look like asbestos containing materials. And don't try to take that on yourself. I mean, although you can take a bulk sample yourself and send it into the lab, we would highly advise you highly not to do that. Trust the professionals. We have the proper protective equipment. We know how to do it. We know how to take a wet sample, things like that, where it's going to minimize impact to the area and then also minimize impact to the person who's taking the sample. So don't try to test for asbestos yourself. It's no bueno, as they say.
No bueno.
Yeah. And just like all the other testing too, just so everybody knows, we're completely independent of the mitigation or the removal of asbestos products in Texas and anywhere else. So we are independent third-party testing that can do that assessment, but we just avoid any conflicts of interest in not only asbestos, but all of our testing. We don't do any remediation, cleaning, or removal of any of those.
And that's a great point too, because, we don't have an interest in finding or not finding whatever it is we're testing for. Our interest is the client. Our interest is getting you to the solution you're looking for, whatever that may be. And if it's telling you, hey, this isn't the area, we tested here, this is not hot, but we need to continue to test in these areas to make sure we get you the answers you're looking for. We have no skin in the game to say yes or no. We just want you to get you that objective third party, get you the data, and then tell you what the next best steps are to get you to that healthy environment.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but when it comes to asbestos, there's actually regulations that prohibit somebody who tests for it from also abating it in the majority of states, as well as in certain states related to mold too.
That's correct.
And those regulations wouldn't be there if they weren't founded on, hey, somebody who might be doing both of these things, testing and then making money off of removing it, that is a very clear potential conflict of interest. So
absolutely.
So important thing to keep in mind. I'm glad you mentioned that, Craig, and it's very important. And again, also it is a state regulation in a lot of scenarios. So anybody doing both could potentially be violating that. So definitely an important thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, in a lot of states, like you said, it's at the state level, but asbestos is one of those that's at the federal level. It's across the board. Yeah. At
least in commercial and schools, as I understand it. But not necessarily in residential. And that's where most.
You can take samples in a residential environment, but to go out and do like a lead survey or air monitoring or anything like that, you have to be licensed.
Yep, definitely. Cool.
Yeah. Well, all good stuff, gentlemen. Any other final thoughts? Anything else that we needed to touch on?
Mike, you had alluded to it. Didn't you guys get involved in some lead, regulations down in Texas recently?
Yeah, actually, that was earlier this year. we were contacted by a state representative, Senator Gervin Hawkins, who we had worked alongside when we were doing some of the mold regulation work down here. And she reached out to me to ask me if we would come and support her lead in school water bill. And so we went down to the Capitol and actually testified on her behalf. And it was an enlightening experience and a little bit scary, to be honest with you, because right now, as it sits just in Texas alone, there's around 10,000 schools that don't have a safe water bill or safe water plan in place. So a lot of those schools are putting different types of filters on like the actual tap water systems and the actual drinking water systems, but they have lead pipes actually feeding into the drinking water there. So it was a little bit scary, and I got connected with Senator Gervin Hawkins, and I was really passionate about it. I did a lot of research on it, and I was really surprised, that other states. Like one of the states we researched was the state of Massachusetts had put in this safe water bill for all schools, and I was just like, how are we what year are we in? Like, how does this just not?
How is that
sense?
not in every state?
Yeah, like these are the kids. These are the future of our country and our states, right?
Yeah.
And honestly, there's lead's a toxic metal. I think everybody knows that. And there's literally no safe blood level established for lead in children. Like they shouldn't have any. And the reason is that I found out was their bones are so soft and still growing, they're porous, and so that when they ingest lead, it absorbs into their bones so much easier than, let's just say, a 50-year-old whose bones are kind of hardened, right? And it, like I said before, it substitutes in the body for healthy calcium, and it's carried through the bloodstream, it deposits in the bones, and it stays there. Now, some lead can be excreted by the body through the waste process, right? But and that's why the EPA probably says that there is a safe level of lead that can be in a water sample. There is a safe amount, right? But to me, it's like if I had younger kids still, and I was even had a concern about that, I would, number one, be getting my water tested at home, but number two, I'd be going to my school board asking them, what is our safe water plan? Do we have a safe water plan in place? And if there's not one, get on that school board and start talking about that, because it's very important. It's one of the things that we were fighting for with Representative Gervin Hawkins. She feels very strongly about it, as do we. But it's something that not a lot of people know about. It gets brushed under the carpet. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody really knows. You just kind of assume when you send your kids to school that it's going to be safe drinking water. That's what you assume, and a lot of people just don't know. So I'd encourage people to ask those questions.
Yeah, definitely. Really good advice, Mike.
Yeah, good information.
Sure.
I tell you, I think that may raise a lot of alarm bells with a lot of parents in every state. Like you said, Brandon, why is this not talked about, and why is it not? Why aren't there those plans in place? And how many of these schools have the older pipes that just haven't been updated?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's got to be a ton. So
yeah,
for sure.
I mean, just think, almost 10,000 in Texas that we identified, not us, 10, but through the bill. Almost 10,000 just in Texas. So if I know we're a fairly large state, but just take the percentage of that, multiply it across 50 states there, and a significant amount of kids being exposed potentially.
Yeah, no doubt.
Wow,
real issues for sure.
Definitely. Well, Brandon, Mike, this has been a pleasure. I tell you, it's been fun. We've had a really informative, especially this last 4-part series.
Grant, it looks like we just had a question come in on my Facebook page.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. Cody Marshall made the podcast. Is there, so what happens with these questions, for everybody listening, is if it comes in on my Facebook page or Brandon's or someone or a company Facebook page, it'll come up as a question. I'm not the one that asked the question. I don't know who asked it. I'll have to go back on there and see. But is there a safe level of lead in water? Well, the EPA establishes one, yes. I would say that would, I don't know for sure. Brandon, maybe you can chime in here, but I would think that would be for adults. But there is no safe level of lead in children's blood. So in how it's ingested is either through ingesting it, which it can be in paint in older homes or through the drinking water. So one of those two ways. So I think there's probably two answers to that. I'll answer the children's side, Brandon.
Yeah.
The
technical side. Yeah. Which I'm not promoting any lead in anybody's water. But if we look at the EPA standard, it's 0.015 micrograms per liter. But again, I'm going to definitely side with Mike on it. You don't want any of it, So that would be like asking these days, what is the safe level of cigarette smoke in your house with children present? We all know better nowadays. So it should be 0. So, but there are a lot of standards set for this, and they are basic guidelines. And it's the reality that we cannot rid our environment of all these contaminants, but we better try hard and do everything we can and just work towards that for sure. So,
for sure.
Yeah. Good point.
Well, looks like my my Facebook questionnaire page is blowing up right now. So in my city's annual water report, if my city's annual water report is clean, is my home safe?
Yeah, I hear this one a lot.
Yeah.
The city's required to test their reservoirs or holding tanks or this or that and provide that data to everybody. And you will hear it, intermittently. Hey, I heard it just in our sister town, real close to me in northern Colorado here recently. They had surpassed the safe levels for a certain type of bacteria. It was a bacteria bloom, and they had told people to, kind of lay back in the tap water. But to answer that question is no. Even if they're testing safe at the holding facility, there's a lot of pipe between that facility and your tap water. Not only is there the city pipes, the municipality pipes and all that are controlled by them, then you actually hit your, your house pipes. And, depending on when that house was built, the types of pipes that were used, going back to, the lead in the pipes and things like that. To simply answer the question is absolutely not. You should, if you're concerned about your water in your home, you should test it at the tap where you're actually consuming that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. There's so many variables in the delivery systems, the builders, materials they use. That's great stuff. And truth.
For sure. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. This, like I said, it's been just a fantastic series, so informative. And I think it's given our listeners and our viewers really some good insight on what we do. We have a pretty extensive amount of knowledge base, testing options. We are here to help our clients, definitely, and that's our mission and our goal. So thank you for your guys' expertise. You guys both have really contributed a lot to all of this. So thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Craig.
I'm kind of sad. I'm kind of sad it's over.
I was gonna say it's bittersweet, eh?
A little bittersweet. Yeah. Well, I guarantee you. Well, I think we'll have you back. Yeah. I guarantee you guys will be back.
Sounds good.
We'll come up with some.
I look forward to it.
Yeah.
And again, I feel like this just kind of spoke to just how passionate, we are about getting people those solutions. And it's, kind of how we hire people. One of the first questions we ask them is, do you care about people and their health? And to be in this industry, we really gotta, you really gotta find those people that really care about helping people. And that's really what we do at the end of the day. And this is just the method that we've chosen to do it because it is very important and it's ever changing. So stay tuned for more episodes.
Yeah, absolutely.
No doubt.
And send us some feedback if you have, if you guys have topics you'd love like us to kind of touch on and discuss. We're always looking for ideas, and we have a pretty amazing team that puts together some great content and topic ideas. So we're always looking for new topics as well.
Yeah, as well as recommendations for facial hair for Mike. If anybody has any recommendations for what they'd like to see on the next round.
Yeah.
I'm open to all suggestions.
Very entertaining.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, guys. And if you've missed any of our podcasts, check out our website. We've got many podcasts on there that are really informative and helpful. If you have any questions, need any assistance or information, please contact our amazing team, customer service representatives. We are truly here to help. And thanks again for joining us. And we look forward to having you join us again for a future podcast. Thank you for joining me today for this episode of the Secret Life of Mold podcast. If you need help with mold issues in your home or office, we'd love to help. For our Texas location, please call 888-335-MOLD. That's 888-335-6653. Or email contact@moldtx.com. For our locations other than Texas, reach out to our customer care team at 800-619-MOLD. That's 800-619-6653. Or email us at contact@moldsci.com.